Standing on his back porch, Mark watched a single garden gnome submerge like a sinking ship in a sea of brown, stagnant water. His neighbor's new luxury, infinity pool, wasn't just an eyesore. It was a structural weapon that had effectively turned Mark's quarter-acre lot into a municipal drainage basin. Most people in this situation call a lawyer or a city inspector and wait 18 months for a shrug. But the true nature of property law isn't found in the fine print of a deed. It's hidden in the physics of fluid dynamics and the terrifying power of the Common Enemy Doctrine. When Mark realized the city wouldn't help him, he stopped playing by the rules of polite society and started playing by the rules of civil engineering. This is the story of how a simple drainage pipe became a tactical instrument of financial ruin. But here where it gets interesting. To understand why Mark didn't just sue, you have to understand the systemic flaw in how our neighborhoods are built. We assume the ground beneath our feet is a fixed asset, but in reality, it's a shifting puzzle of watersheds. When the neighbor, a wealthy developer named Sterling, raised his land by 4 feet to accommodate a patio, he didn't just improve his view. He redirected thousands of gallons of runoff directly into Mark's foundation. Sterling's response was a classic display of modern indifference. Water flows downhill, Mark. Take it up with gravity. That's not the full story. In many jurisdictions, there is a legal concept that treats surface water as a common enemy. It means you have the right to protect your land from water, even if that protection causes the water to flood your neighbor instead. Sterling knew this. He had built a fortress and Mark was the moat. But the doctrine has one massive, overlooked loophole. You can defend your land, but you cannot legally collect, concentrate, and discharge water onto someone else's property through artificial means. This changes everything. Mark didn't get angry. He got a transit level and a shovel. He spent 3 weeks meticulously mapping the elevation of his property, discovering that his yard wasn't just wet. It was being fed by a series of hidden, illegal PVC weep holes tucked behind Sterling's new retaining wall. Sterling hadn't just used gravity. He had built a private sewer system that ended in Mark's flower beds. He was utilizing a stealth discharge method, assuming Mark was too uninformed to notice the difference between natural rainfall and directed runoff. The logic of the situation was simple, yet brutal. If Mark simply blocked the holes, the pressure would eventually crack the wall, leading to a messy legal battle over property damage. But that was too fast, too obvious. Instead, he decided to use the system against itself. He installed what looked like a decorative French drain along the property line. On the surface, it looked like Mark was finally fixing his yard, playing the role of the defeated neighbor finally cleaning up the mess. In reality, he was building a hydraulic bypass. Why is this important? Because most people think conflict is about confrontation. It's not. It's about redirected energy. Mark studied the blueprints for Sterling, smart home renovation, which were tucked away in public city records. He found the Achilles heel. Sterling had invested $80,000 in a subterranean, climate-controlled wine cellar. It was the crown jewel of the house, built with state-of-the-art waterproofing, but designed under the assumption that the surrounding soil would remain at a standard saturation level. By connecting his new drainage system directly to the output of Sterling's illegal weep holes, Mark created a closed loop. But instead of sending the water to the street, he routed it toward a very specific, very expensive geological feature on the back of Sterling's lot, the area directly uphill from that cellar's foundation. But wait, there's a catch. For the plan to work, Mark needed a catalyst. He needed a 100-year storm. In the era of shifting climate patterns, he only had to wait 3 weeks. When the clouds finally broke, the sheer volume of water being pumped off Sterling's patio didn't settle in Mark's yard. It hit the bypass. The water traveled through the silent, underground plastic veins Mark had laid, moving with a velocity that only concentrated pressure can provide. And then the realization hit. Sterling woke up the next morning to a cellar that wasn't just damp, it was an aquarium. Because Mark had engineered the exit point to be a bubble-up grate located just inches from Sterling's foundation, the water followed the path of least resistance. It wasn't just the volume of the water, it was the hydrostatic pressure. Water is heavy, about 62.4 pounds per cubic foot. When that weight is concentrated against a foundation wall that isn't expecting it, the water doesn't just sit there. It finds every microscopic pore in the concrete. Now, you might wonder why Sterling didn't just call the police. The answer lies in the irony of the Common Enemy Doctrine. To admit that Mark's drain had flooded his cellar, Sterling would first have to admit that he had been illegally discharging his water into Mark's yard for months. He had built the weapon. Mark had simply pointed it back at the owner. This is where the math of the nightmare truly adds up. Sterling was trapped in a financial pincer movement. The cost to repair a saturated foundation and a mold-infested custom cellar is roughly triple the cost of the original construction. To fix the issue permanently, Sterling would have to tear down his illegal wall, regrade his entire lot, and pay for the damages to his own interior, all while the city's code enforcement, now tipped off by Mark's concerns about the neighborhood's water table, hovered over his shoulder. It's a perfect example of systemic leverage. Most people try to fight the system head-on, which is expensive and exhausting. The more effective route is to find where the system is already under tension and simply remove the safety pin. Sterling had built a house of cards on a foundation of arrogance, and all it took was a few lengths of PVC pipe and a basic understanding of physics to bring it down. And this changes the way you look at your own surroundings. Think about the infrastructure around you right now. The roads, the power lines, the drainage in your own street. We live in a world of delicately balanced pressures. We assume they are managed by experts, but often they are held together by nothing more than the hope that no one understands the physics of the common enemy. Sterling eventually had to tear down the entire wall, regrade his lot at his own expense, and pay Mark a quiet settlement to keep the engineering flaws out of the public record. Mark's yard is now dry, lush, and perfectly level. He even kept the garden gnome, though it now sits on a concrete pedestal, a small monument to the man who learned how to make gravity work for him. But this wasn't just about a yard. It was a masterclass in the invisible mechanics of the world we inhabit. We are surrounded by systems that work perfectly until they are forced to account for their own externalities. When the person next door tries to make their problem your problem, remember that every system has a return path. This is just one of many systems hiding in plain sight.